This is the calendar for 2017-2018, a biblical calendar restoration based on the Luni-Solar Barley Harvest calendation. The divine calendar restoration with the lunar month when the day starts and ends in the evening. It can be demonstrated that the various calendars in the Bible are all based upon the lunar month. That this month was lunar is shown from the fact that the day ended at evening when Levitical uncleanness ceased. Genesis chapter 1 verses 5, 8, 13, 19, and 31 formally describe what a complete day of 24 hours is made of. The evening and the morning were the first day. In the Bible, the evening comprehends darkness, the night, the morning, the light, the day. This is not only repeated once or twice, but it is repeated for the second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth day. Therefore, a day based on the lunar calendar starts at sunset and finishes at sunset. A day based on the solar calendar would start in the morning and finish in the morning. It is called a Luni-Solar Barley Harvest base calendar because of the ceremony of the barley, which was the divine rule by which the position of the month was located. Actually, Abib, the first month of the biblical year, means barley is ripe. If by the 1st of Abib the barley was not sufficiently advanced for the Passover festival, then a leap month was added, and the feast period of the year was delayed until the following month, making it an embollismic year rather than a common year. What many people do not know is that the Luni-Solar Barley Harvest regulation was replaced by the vernal equinox intercalation. The Mosaic ceremony connected with the barley harvest, so vital in its control of the Jewish year, did not long survive the first century of the Christian era because of the dispersion of the Jews. The period of persecution which followed the fall of the Second Temple in 70 AD ultimately brought about a fixed calendar for the Jews, one that was based upon an entirely different rule of intercalation, the vernal equinox, rather than the ancient barley harvest regulation. The historical date of October 22, 1844, restored God's great celestial clock of the spheres for us. The 2300-year span of Daniel 8:14 is the longest of all the allotted time periods of inspired prophecy. It is the most complex of all in its involvement because it comprehends a series of subdivisions marked off by events whose synchronizing relationship cannot be disturbed without disturbing the whole divine scheme. The boundaries and divisions of this mighty period are timed by God's great celestial clock of the spheres, which swing inherently through space, telling of the years, months, days, hours, and minutes with the undeviating precision of infinity, guiding to October 22nd, 1844, with the beginning of the Great Day of Atonement. We are to worship the Creator from one new moon to another, from one Sabbath to another. This date of October 22nd, 1844 cannot be impeached. and its reckoning is based on the Luni-Solar Barley Harvest New Moon Horned Crescent calendar, which the Millerites restored in 1844. The Gregorian date of October 22nd is the 22nd of the 10th month of the Gregorian calendar, which by conversion becomes the 10th day of the 7th month, or Great Day of Atonement, in 1844, according to the Biblical Feast of Leviticus 23, verse 27 to 32. Based on these premises, it can be proven biblically, astronomically, chronologically, and historically that we are to worship the Creator from one new moon to another and from one Sabbath to another, as we are reminded in Isaiah 66, verse 23. Psalm 104:19 instructs us that He appointed the moon for seasons, the sun knows is going down. We hope and pray you will appreciate this gift, the biblical Luni-Solar Barley Harvest calendar versus the Gregorian solar calendar for 2017-2018, and it is based on the restoration of the Creator's calendar in 1844. The biblical creation calendar is based on the Luni-Solar Barley Harvest reckoning. This can be demonstrated through Leviticus 23, Numbers 28 and 29, and many other synchronism in the Bible. It was restored by the Creator Himself through the Millerites in 1844. This is the calendar for 2017-2018, which was prepared by Odette Boilly, President and Founder of Way of Life Association Incorporated, Association Mode de Vie Incorporée. Way of Life, School of Health offer gospel medical missionary agents training in order to set up health centers and vegan restaurants. You can visit us at our website www.numbers1317.org or contact us through numbers1317@gmail.com. If you wish to further your knowledge of astronomy, you would do well to use the universal time of the moon cycle and additional information as we find on USNO website, the Moon Connection website, Her Majesty Observatory, Way of Life and the Sanctuary website, as well as the Calendar Counterfeit Unmasked YouTube, which has 69 videos on which the Grace Amadon Collection is presented. I encourage you to pursue your study in order to better understand and appreciate this great gift given directly from heaven. The importance of the Sabbath as the memorial of creation is that it keeps ever present the true reason why worship is due to God, because He is the Creator and we are His creatures. The Sabbath, therefore, lies at the very foundation of divine worship, for it teaches this great truth in the most impressive manner, and no other institution does this. The true ground of divine worship, not of that on the seventh day merely, but of all worship, is found in the distinction between the Creator and His creatures. This great fact can never become obsolete and must never be forgotten. It was to keep this truth before the minds of man that God instituted the Sabbath in Eden. And so long as the fact that He is our Creator continues to be a reason why we should worship Him, so long the Sabbath will continue as its sign and memorial. The last great conflict between truth and error is but the final struggle of the long-standing controversy concerning the law of God. Upon this battle, we are now entering a battle between the laws of man and the precepts of Jehovah, between the religion of the Bible and the religion of fable and tradition. Scaliger, a well-known chronologist of the 16th century, declared the method of Jewish reckoning as the most ingenious and most elegant of all systems of chronology. We recommend that you refer to the link attached here in order to read the 6-part series of the Grace Amadon Collection, which revealed a most beautiful background on the Biblical Calendar, which was restored by the Creator himself through the Millerites in the 1840 era. The end of the 8th biblical month and the beginning of the 9th biblical month, both part of the civil calendar, for the common year of 2017-2018. The black numbers are the Gregorian reckoning and the red numbers are the biblical reckoning. The month of November 2017 starts on the 10th of the 8th biblical month. The new moon in October was on the Monday, Gregorian reckoning. Therefore, as we continue with the 15th, 22nd, and 29th for the 7-day Sabbath of the 8th month, it will correspond to the 6th, 13th, and 20th day of November, a Monday Gregorian reckoning. Then it will pass to the new moon on the 21st of November 2017, corresponding to the 1st of the month for the 9th month, followed by the biblical Sabbath of the 8th, corresponding to the 28th of November 2017. The full moon for the 8th biblical month, corresponding to the 13th of the 8th, and the 4th of November 2017 Gregorian reckoning, is followed by the conjunction or the astronomical new moon, which correspond to the 27th of the 8th biblical month or 18th of November 2017 Gregorian reckoning. The horn crescent will be seen the evening of the 29th of the 8th month, being a 29th day, corresponding to the 20th of November 2017. And from sunset to sunset, from the 29th to the 1st of the 9th month, we will be celebrating then the new moon. This is the way we do the reckoning for using the Gregorian and then passing to the biblical month. And as we do the other reckoning, you will get acquainted with this conversion. This is what it's called. It's a conversion from one month to another and from one calendar reckoning to another. When there shall be a restitution of all things, which God hath spoken by the mouth of all his holy prophets since the world began, the creation Sabbath, the day on which Jesus lay at rest in Joseph's tomb, will still be a day of rest and rejoicing. Heaven and earth will unite in praise as from one new moon to another and from one Sabbath to another, the nations of the saved shall bow in joyful worship to God and the Lamb. The Luni-Solar Barley Harvest calendation is made up of 354 days of 29 or 30 days moon cycle and 365 days solar cycle. The accommodation of the 11 days difference between the two cycles, meaning 365 minus 354, is made up with the embolismic year, which has an additional month every 2 to 3 years. All the other years are called common years. In the case of 2016-17, this was a common year. 2017-18 is an embolismic year. The end of the 9th biblical month and the beginning of the 10th biblical month, both part of the civil calendar, are for the common year 2017-2018. The black numbers are the Gregorian reckoning, the red numbers are the biblical reckoning. The month of December 2017 begins on a Friday, corresponding to the 11th of the 9th biblical month. The new moon being for the 9th month on a Tuesday Gregorian reckoning, the biblical Sabbath for the 15th, 22nd, and 29th, corresponding to the 5th, 12th, and the 19th of December Gregorian reckoning, will also be celebrated on a Tuesday Gregorian reckoning. The 9th biblical month is a 30-day month. Therefore, the new moon for the 10th biblical month will correspond to the 21st of December, followed with the 8th of the 7-day Sabbath of the 10th month on the 28th of December 2017. The full moon for the 9th biblical month corresponds to the 3rd of December or the 13th of the 9th biblical month. The conjunction or astronomical new moon corresponding to the 28th of the 9th month biblical month or the 18th of December 2017 Gregorian reckoning. The horn crescent will be seen on the evening of the 30th day of the 9th month, the 9th month having 30 days, corresponding to the 20th of December 2017. The new moon then of the 10th month will be celebrated on the 21st of December Gregorian reckoning, followed by the first of the 7-day Sabbath for the month on the 28th of December Gregorian reckoning, and following the new moon, which occurs on a Thursday Gregorian reckoning. There is definitely some things to learn, something to understand. They're not quite easy, but as you get used to the reckoning and the conversion from one to the other, it will become easier. The Jewish new moons, that is, the new moons that marked the first day of the month, commonly exceeded the ordinary size of the phases, or first appearance of the moon. While the Greeks started their month from the conjunction itself, it was a certain shape of the moon that regulated the beginning of the Jewish month. Scaliger sometimes calls it the horned moon. Sabbath and new moon, or Rosh Chodesh, were both periodically reoccurring in the course of the year. The new moon is still, and the Sabbath originally was, dependent upon the lunar cycle. Both date back to the nomadic period of Israel. Originally, the new moon was celebrated in the same way as the Sabbath, but gradually it became less important, and the Sabbath became more and more a day of religion and humanity, of religious meditation and instruction, of peace and delight of the soul, and produced powerful and beneficent effects outside of Judaism. The end of the 10th biblical month and the beginning of the 11th biblical month, both part of the civil calendar for the common year of 2017-2018, with the black numbers representing the Gregorian reckoning and the red numbers representing the biblical reckoning. For January 2018, the first of the month will be on a Monday, and the Thursday, according to the 10th month, the new moon being on a Thursday Gregorian reckoning, we continue here in January with the 15th, the the 22nd, and the 29th of the 10th month, corresponding to the 4th, 11, and 18 of January, Gregorian reckoning. This 10th month, again, is a 30-day month, and it corresponds to the 19th of January, passing to the new moon on a Saturday, Gregorian reckoning, corresponding to the 20th of January, and making the 8th of the 11th month, the 27th of January. Observe that the full moon in January is on the 2nd of January, corresponding to the 13th of the 10th month. The astronomical new moon is on the 17th of January, or 28th of the 10th month, and the horned crescent is on the 19th of January, corresponding to the 30th of the 10th month. There is also another full moon on the 31st of January, corresponding to the 12th of the 11th month. Please take into consideration that this is not two full moon in the same month, because we are talking the biblical month here, the Luni-Solar Barley Harvest moon calendar. Therefore, the 2nd of January, corresponding to the 13th of the 10th month, and the 31st of January corresponds to the 12th of the 11th month. So they are two different months according to the biblical calendar. There are only a few calendar dates in the Bible, less than 100 altogether, and these are not evenly distributed, some periods being marked by a comparatively larger number than others. In the account of the flood and Exodus, in the prophecy of Ezekiel, the post-exilic books, and the Gospels, there is sufficient number of time divisions to each period to frame the form of calendar employed. It can be demonstrated that these various biblical calendars are all based upon the lunar month, but that they principally differ in one respect, the time of beginning the civil year. Under the administration of Moses, current time, both of civil and religious, was reckoned from the first month, and that this month was lunar is shown from the fact that the day ended at evening when Levitical uncleanness ceased. The end of the 11th biblical month and the beginning of the 12th biblical month, both part of the civil calendar for the coming year of 2017-2018. The black numbers being the Gregorian reckoning, the red numbers the biblical reckoning. The month of February 2018 begins on the Thursday Gregorian reckoning, corresponding to the 13th of the 11th biblical month. The new moon for the 11th month being on the Saturday Gregorian reckoning, the 15th, 22nd, and 29th 7-day Sabbath for the 11th month will be on the 3rd, 10th, and 17th of February 2018, a Saturday Gregorian reckoning. The new moon for the 12th month will be corresponding to a Sunday Gregorian reckoning on the 18th of February 2018, followed with the first biblical Sabbath on the 25th of February 2018, and that will be the 8th of the 12th month. The astronomical new moon corresponds to the 28th of the 11th month, or the 16th of February 2018 Gregorian reckoning. The horn crescent will be seen on the evening of the 29th of the 11th biblical month, corresponding to the 17th of February 2018 Gregorian reckoning. And this is the reason why, being a 29-day, the 11th month, we pass to the 12th month on the 18th of February 2018. An earliest of all ancient reckonings, the Pentateuchal Flood Chronicle takes its place with various forms of calendars. In actual point of time, the Flood Chronicle belongs to the most primitive period of biblical history, the Patriarchal Age, but the large numbers of dates that occur in the description of the flood at once give it an historical character. This is of untold interest and importance to chronology. Under the influence of the divine spirit, Moses reckons back many centuries in time and ties his record to the very simplest form of a lunar calendar. He does number his months after the manner of both Israel and Egypt in his own day, and fixes their length by a series of parallel period and weeks. And he thereby establishes both lunar and solar constants relating, 1, to the length of the lunar month and year, and 2, to the length of the solar or tropical year. The end of the 12th biblical month and the beginning of the 13th biblical month, both part of the civil calendar. This is for the 2017-2018 embolismic year. The black numbers are for the Gregorian reckoning, the red numbers for the biblical reckoning. The month of March will begin what corresponds to the 12 of the 12th biblical month on a Thursday. The new moon that shows in the precedent month in February was on a Sunday. Therefore, we continue with the 3 remaining 7-day Sabbath for the 15th, 22nd, and 29th, corresponding to the 4th, the 11th, and the 18th of March, Gregorian reckoning. The new moon for the 13th biblical month, which is what makes it an embolismic year. We have to add 1 month because the barley, according to calculation, will not be ready on time to celebrate the Passover in the month of April. It falls on the 20th of March, Gregorian reckoning, and the 8th, the biblical 7-day Sabbath, will be celebrated on the 27th of March, Gregorian reckoning. The 12th month, will be a 30-day month, and we can see the full moon of the 12th month on the 13th of the 12th month, corresponding to the 2nd of March, with the astronomical new moon or conjunction on the 17th of March, corresponding to the 28th of the 12th month. The horn crescent will be celebrated or seen on the 30th day of the 12th month, corresponding to the 19th of March, and that is why we will be celebrating from sunset to sunset the new moon of the 13th month. Again, the year 2017 and 18 is an embolismic year, meaning 1 month is added because of the season of barley. The last full moon that we see here is corresponding to the 12th of the 13th month, corresponding to the 31st of March Gregorian reckoning. This is not that we have 2 full moons in the same month, because we're talking Luni-Solar biblical month. Therefore, the first full moon on the 2nd of March corresponds to the 13th of the 12th month, and the last full moon on the 31st of March corresponds to the 12th of the 13th month. So those 2 months are biblical months. The first month of the Jewish year pointed to the season of barley. In Exodus 9, verses 31 and 32, Moses gives a very important detail under the 7th plague. And the flax and the barley was smitten, for the barley was in the year, and the flax was bold. But the wheat and the rye were not smitten, for they were not grown up. Sidusky wrote, the aim of the Mosaic command was to regulate the months according to the course of the moon, and the whole year in accordance with the course of the sun, by assigning as a starting point the lunar month, coinciding with the beginning of a determined solar season. That determined solar season was still the barley harvest in the time of Christ. The ceremony of the barley was the divine rule by which the position of the month Nisan or Abib was located. If by the 1st of Nisan the barley was not sufficiently advanced for the Passover festival, then a leap month was added, and the feast period of the year was delayed until the following month, making it an embollismic year. This is the end of the 13 biblical months of the civil calendar, and we are entering now of the beginning of the first biblical month of the religious calendar, as being part of the embollismic year 2017-2018, again having the black numbers for the Gregorian reckoning and the red numbers pointing to the biblical reckoning. April 2018 starts on a Sunday corresponding to the 13th of the 13th biblical month, and the new moon being on a Tuesday Gregorian reckoning, the 15th, 22nd, and 29th of the 13th month will be celebrated on the 3rd, 10th, and 17th of April Gregorian reckoning. The 13th month is a 29-day month, and the new moon will be on the Wednesday corresponding to the 18th of April Gregorian reckoning, and that will be the month of Abib, the new year, the new moon, and the first month. And the 8th of the first month will be on the 25th of April, the first Sabbath of that month. We observe the astronomical new moon will be on the 16th of April, corresponding to the 28th of the 13th month, with the horn crescent on the 17th of April, corresponding to the 29th of the 13th month, and celebrating the new moon on the 18th of April, Gregorian reckoning, for the first of the month. The full moon for the first month will be on the 30th of April, corresponding to the 13th of the first month of biblical month of the religious calendar. The Jewish feast period began with the month of barley harvest, and its paschal moon or moon of Nisan, Abib, was the appointed moon of barley harvest. The Passover was numbered according to the moon, that is, the days of the month were the same as the days of the moon. Indeed, the Hebrew word Hodesh for month means new moon. It was the actual horned crescent new moon, not any fictitious new moon, that regulated the great festivals, for it was an observed moon. If we accept the testimony of Aristobulus, 200 years before Christ, that the Passover of the Jews followed the sunset of the day, when the full moon rising in the east faces the setting sun in the west, we can reasonably conclude that the Jewish Passover, which is repeatedly described in the Bible as the 14th day of Nisan or Abib, was the day following the full moon date and not on it, or was the day after the evening when the moon stands diametrically opposed to the sun, as everyone can see at the time of full moon. The biblical religious calendars of the spring and fall feasts, Leviticus 23 and Numbers 28 and 29. The spring feasts start in the spring with the new moon horn crescent at the season of the barley harvest. The spring festivals are Passover, which we call Abib 14 or the first month, March and April, common year, or April-May for an embollismic year, according to the Gregorian reckoning. The second feast is the Feast of Unleavened Bread on Abib 15 to 21. And of course, Abib 15 corresponds always to a 7-day Sabbath. But the 21st does not correspond to a 7-day Sabbath, but it is a Sabbath day, a day of rest. The Passover, you can do some servile work on that day. The third feast is the Feast of First Fruits on Abib 16, which is not a day of a Sabbath. It actually can permit you to do servile work on that day, followed by the Feast of Pentecost on the third month, and it always comes on the 9th day of the third month, or the month of Sivan, which corresponds usually around the month of June of the Gregorian reckoning. The fall feast, which start in the fall with the new moon of the 7th month, and they are the Feast of Trumpets, Tisri 1 or 7th month, usually is around September, October of Gregorian reckoning, followed by the Day of Atonement, 10 days later on Tisri 10 or the 7th month, then the Feast of Tabernacle on the 15th and the 22nd of the 7th month, Tisri, and it's always corresponding to a 7-day Sabbath. So therefore we have 7 feasts. However, Passover and First Fruits are not celebrated as a Sabbath. Unleavened bread has 2 Sabbath celebration. Pentecost is the Sabbath. Trumpet is the Sabbath. The Day of Atonement is the Sabbath. And the first and the last day of Tabernacles are also Sabbath, making it 7 feasts with 7 Sabbaths, but not the 7 feasts necessarily are Sabbath because of Passover and First Fruits. The end of the first biblical month and the beginning of the second biblical month, both under the religious calendar and the embolismic year of 2017-2018, with the black numbers for the Gregorian reckoning and the red numbers for the biblical reckoning. May 2018 starts with a Tuesday and corresponds to the 14th of Abib, or the 14th of the first month, with the celebration of the Passover. The 15th of Abib, or the 15th of the first month, on the 2nd of May, Gregorian reckoning, is the Feast of Unleavened Bread and also a biblical 7-day Sabbath. The 3rd of May corresponds to the 16th of the first month, or the Feast of First Fruits. Only one of those feasts, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, is a Sabbath day. It is kept as a day of rest, especially corresponding to the 7-day Sabbath of rest. Passover and First Fruits, though they are under the Feast of Leviticus 23, they are not feasts that we celebrate as a Sabbath of rest. We can do secular work on those 2 days. Please notice that the full moon was celebrated the last day of April, which corresponded to the 13th of Abib. Then, following through the statement that we read about Aristobulus 500 years before Christ, we follow the same approach, and we believe that the Passover then is always the day after the full moon date and not on it. Therefore, just like the day of Gethsemane is represented by the evening of the full moon, and the next afternoon was when Christ was crucified, which corresponds to the 14th of Abib, or the day of Passover. The last day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread is on the 8th of May, 2018, Gregorian reckoning, corresponding to the 21st of Abib, or the 21st of the first month, and it's celebrated as a Sabbath, as a day of rest. And the 22nd of Abib, on the 9th of May, is also a Sabbath, the weekly Sabbath, the 7-day Sabbath. And as we continue with the 7-day Sabbath, the 29 of the first month would correspond to the 16 of May. And the first month is always a 30-day. Therefore, the 17 of May would be the 30th day of the first month. And then the new moon for the second month will be on the 18th of May, establishing then the Sabbath for the next week on the 25th of May, Gregorian reckoning, as the 8th of the second month. The new moon, astronomical new moon as we call it, or the conjunction, would be on the 15th of May or the 28th of the first month. The horn crescent will be seen on the 17th of May at sunset or the 30th of the first month, and that's why we are establishing the new moon celebration on the 18th of May or the 1st of the second month. The full moon for the second month will be on the 29th of May, Gregorian reckoning, corresponding to the 12th of the second month, biblical month, still a religious month. The Mosaic ceremony connected with the barley harvest, so vital in its control of the Jewish year, did not long survive the first century of the Christian era because of the dispersion of the Jews. The period of persecution which followed the fall of the Second Temple in 70 AD ultimately brought about a fixed calendar for the Jews, one that was based upon an entirely different rule of intercalation, the vernal equinox, rather than the ancient barley harvest regulation. The end of the second biblical month and the beginning of the third biblical month under the religious calendar and the emballismic year of 2017-2018, with the black numbers corresponding to the Gregorian reckoning and the red numbers to the biblical reckoning. The month of June 2018 starts on a Friday, corresponding to the 15th of the second month, which is a 7-day Sabbath, followed by the 22nd and the 29th 7-day Sabbath, corresponding to the 8th and the 15th of June, Gregorian reckoning. The second month has 29 days, and the new moon for the third month will be on the 16th of June 2018, Gregorian reckoning, followed by the 8th and the 15th 7-day Sabbath on the 23rd and the 30th of June. There is also a biblical feast on the 24th of June corresponding to Pentecost, which is always celebrated on the 9th of the third month. The astronomical new moon on the second month will be on the 13th of June, corresponding to the 27th of the second month, and the horn crescent will be on the 15th of June at sunset, corresponding to the 29th of the second month. The full moon of the third month will be on the 28th of June, corresponding to the 13th of the third month. About the 8th century AD, the Karaites arose to oppose the influence of the Rabbinites' fixed calendar and to restore the barley harvest schedule as the important index to regulate the leap year or emballismic year. This controversy over the Hebrew calendar raged for several centuries. It really represented a rivalry between Palestine and Babylon for the prerogative of keeping time for the Jewish nation. Though the Karaites were biblically correct, in the end, the Babylonian Jews gained control of the calendar and Karaism dwindled. the end of the third biblical month and the beginning of the fourth biblical month under the religious calendar and the embollismic year of 2017-2018. The month of July 2018 starts on a Sunday corresponding to the 16th of the third biblical month. On the 7th and the 14th of July Gregorian reckoning, we will be celebrating the 22nd and the 29th biblical 7-day Sabbath of the third month. The third month is a 30-day month, and the new moon will be on the 16th of July Gregorian reckoning, the new moon of the fourth month. On the 23rd and the 30th of July 2018, we will be celebrating the 8th and the 15th of the fourth biblical month, both 7-day Sabbath. The astronomical new moon for the third month corresponds to the 13th of July Gregorian reckoning, and it is the 28th of the third month, followed by the horn crescent on the 15th of July Gregorian reckoning, or the 30th of the third month, and the new moon will be on the 16th of July for the new moon of the fourth month. The full moon will be on the 27th of July, corresponding to the 12th of the fourth month. Unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. The 2,300-year span is the longest of all the allotted time periods of inspired prophecy. It is the most complex of all in its involvement because it comprehends a series of subdivisions marked off by events whose synchronizing relationship cannot be disturbed without disturbing the whole divine scheme. The terminal point of this great prophecy became the center of absorbing interest and reverent study back in the early decades of the 19th century. The close of the great 1260-year period, told off by the living God as the era of the little horn, according to Daniel chapter 7, verse 25, having come during the time of the French Revolution, 1789-1798, the minds of earnest students of prophecy then turned simultaneously in different lands to the approaching end of the 2,300-year prophecy of Daniel 8:14, at the time of God's long foretold hour of judgment, or the antitypical day of atonement. The end of the fourth biblical month and the beginning of the fifth biblical month under the religious calendar and the embollismic year of 2017-2018. The month of August 2018 begins on a Wednesday corresponding to the 17th of the fourth biblical month. The 22nd and the 29th of the fourth month, 7-day Sabbath, correspond to the 6th and the 13th of August, a Monday, Gregorian reckoning. The fourth month has 29 days, and the new moon for the fifth month will be on the 14th of August Gregorian reckoning, with the 8th and the 15th of the fifth month, biblical month, corresponding to the 21st and the 28th of August Gregorian reckoning, when we will be celebrating the 7-day Sabbath. On the 11th of August will be the astronomical new moon or conjunction, corresponding to the 27th of the fourth month, followed with the horn crescent on the 13th of August at sunset, corresponding to the 29th of the fourth month. Then on the 14th will be the new moon that we are celebrating. The full moon for the fifth month is on the 26th of August, corresponding to the 13th of the fifth biblical month. The 2300 days commenced in 457 BC with the decree to rebuild Jerusalem from Artaxerxes under Ezra. It had been shown that Christ was crucified in AD 31 in the midst of the 70th week, or 490 days of years. Therefore, the 70 weeks terminated in the autumn of AD 34, and the 2300 days of years terminated in the autumn of 1844 with the Day of Atonement, or cleansing of the sanctuary. 2300 days minus 490 days, which are of years, will give you 1810 years. Adding to it the 34 years remaining, and you will obtain the 1844. We encourage you to read the Grace Amadon Collection, the 6-part series, along with a study on synchronism and chronology of 457 BC and the genealogy of the Bible. The writings of the Christian Jewish scholar Joseph Samuel C.F. Frey exerted a marked influence upon Snow and his associates in fixing upon October 22, 1844, as the precise 10th day of the 7th month, based on the biblical Luni-Solar Barley Harvest calendar, as a fulfillment of the Atonement optional type. The end of the 5th biblical month and the beginning of the 6th biblical month, both under the religious calendar and the embollismic year of 2017-2018. The month of September 2018 Gregorian reckoning starts on a Saturday, corresponding to the 19th of the 5th biblical month. The 22nd and the 29th of the 5th biblical month correspond to the 4th and the 11th of September Gregorian reckoning, and it is to celebrate the 7-day Sabbath. The 5th biblical month is a 29-day month, and the new moon of the 6th month corresponds to the 12th of September Gregorian reckoning, followed by the 19th and the 26th of September, where the 8th and the 15th 7-day Sabbath will be celebrated. The astronomical new moon will be on the 9th of September 2018, corresponding to the 27th of the 5th month, with the horn crescent being seen on the 11th of September Gregorian reckoning, corresponding to the 29th of the 5th month, making the 12th of September being the new moon of the 6th month. The full moon for the 6th biblical month will be on the 25th of September, corresponding to the 14th of the 6th biblical month. The unimpeachable calendar, the validity of October 22, 1844. The preaching of a definite time for the judgment was ordered of God. The computation based on the Luni-Solar Barley Harvest calendar Mosaic law of the prophetic periods on which that message was based, placing the close of the 2300 days in the autumn of 1844, stands without impeachment. We encourage you to study further with the Great Controversy, page 457, and the response to Elder Rodriguez, What About a Lunar Sabbath?, in order to be grounded into the validity of October 22nd. There are many who could prove the validity of 1844, but very few know how to prove the 22nd of October date as the 10th day of the 7th month in 1844. The validity of October 22nd as the true equivalent of the 10th day of the 7th month of the appointed Jewish sacred year depends, point 1, upon the correct determination of the true beginning of the biblical sacred year. Point 2, upon locating the true 7th month in that year. Point 3, upon the correct reckoning of the true 10th day of that 7th month. And point 4, upon the basis of the Karaite Hebrew reckoning. The end of the 6th biblical month and the beginning of the 7th biblical month, which corresponds to the last part now of the religious calendar before we pass on to the civil calendar. This is actually the end of the religious calendar of the embollismic year 2017-2018. The month of October begins on a Monday Gregorian reckoning, which corresponds to the 20th of the 6th biblical month. The biblical Sabbath, the 7-day Sabbath, the 22nd and the 29th, coming on a Wednesday because the new moon was on a Wednesday Gregorian reckoning for the 6th month, correspond to the 3rd and the 10th of October Gregorian reckoning. The new moon or the Feast of Trumpets or the 1st of the 7th month will be corresponding to the 11th of October Gregorian reckoning, followed by the 8th of the 7th biblical month, the first 7-day Sabbath, corresponding to the 18th of October Gregorian reckoning, followed 2 days later by the Day of Atonement, the 10th of the 7th month, corresponding to the 20th of October 2018 Gregorian reckoning. 5 days later, we will be celebrating the Feast of Tabernacles, the first day corresponding to the 15th of the 7th month, also a 7-day Sabbath. It's a high day. And the last day of the Feast of Tabernacle, corresponding to the 22nd of the 7th biblical month, corresponding also, of course, to the 1st of November, is a celebration of the 7th month, the 7th biblical month. We choose to present it here because it overlaps from the month of October Gregorian reckoning, but it is part of the Feast of Tabernacle, followed by the 29th of the 7th biblical month, which is the last 7-day Sabbath for the 7th biblical month, corresponding to the 8th of November. As we look now at the phases of the moon, the conjunction or astronomical new moon for the 6th month will be the 28th of the 6th biblical month, corresponding to the 9th of October. The full moon, or I should say the horn crescent first, which correspond to the 29th of the 6th biblical month, will be corresponding to the 10th of October, which brings the 11th of October Gregorian reckoning, the new moon. The full moon for the 7th biblical month will be on the 14th of the 7th biblical month, corresponding to the 24th of October 2018. And because we have considered the 22nd and the 29th of the 7th month to finish the religious calendar, and which occur in the month of November, Gregorian reckoning, the conjunction or astronomical new moon in the 7th month will be on the 8th of November, corresponding to the 29th of the 7th biblical month, and the horn crescent will be the 30th of the 7th biblical month or the 9th of November. And if we think that this is a bit late for the Feast of Tabernacle, let's remember that in October 1844, the Day of Atonement was the 22nd of October, where here it's the 20th. As we consider the biblical months, we must remember that we can do a conversion into the Gregorian reckoning, but this does not influence the cycle of the moon where it's supposed to come to pass. So therefore, this particular month being a typical embollismic month, the last month of the religious calendar, is very, very a normal happening as far as its seemingly date that is late into November. We're hoping that you will have a wonderful embolismic year coming soon. And as you study this and you prepare for the embolismic year, if you have never celebrated one, you will see that the moon cycle is always precise, is always concise, and it's very, very beautiful to follow. In seeking to cast contempt upon the divine statutes, Satan has perverted the doctrines of the Bible, and errors have thus become incorporated into the faith of thousands who profess to believe the Scriptures. The last great conflict between truth and error is but the final struggle of the long-standing controversy concerning the law of God. Upon this battle, we are now entering a battle between the laws of men and the precepts of Jehovah, between the religion of the Bible and the religion of fable and tradition. Now the God of peace that brought again from the dead our Lord Jesus, that great shepherd of the sheep, through the blood of the everlasting covenant, make you perfect in every good work, to do his will, working in you that which is well-pleasing in his sight, through Jesus Christ, to whom be glory forever and ever.